In Greek mythology, the Sirens were dangerous creatures, who lured nearby sailors with their enchanting music and singing voices to shipwreck on the rocky coast of their island. It is also said that they can even charm the winds. Roman poets placed them on some small islands called Sirenum Scopuli. In some later, rationalized traditions, the literal geography of the flowery island of Anthemessa, or Anthemusa, is fixed, sometimes on Cape Pellerum and at others in the islands known as the Sirenus, near Paestum, or in Capri. All such locations were surrounded by cliffs and rocks. The etymology of the name is contested. Robert S. P. Beeks has suggested a pre-Greek origin. Others connect the name to Sarah and arrow, resulting in the meaning, binder, entangler. One who binds or entangles through magic song. This could be connected to the famous scene of Odysseus being bound to the mast of his ship, in order to resist their song. The English word, siren, referring to a noise-making device, derives from the name. Sirens were believed to look like a combination of women and birds in various different forms. In early Greek art, they were represented as birds with large women's heads, bird feathers and scaly feet. Later, they were represented as female figures with the legs of birds, with or without wings, playing a variety of musical instruments, especially harps and lyres. The 7th century Anglo-Latin catalogue Liber Monstrorum says that sirens were women from their heads to their navels, and instead of legs they had fishtails. The 10th century Byzantine encyclopedia Suda says that from their chests up, sirens had the form of sparrows, and below they were women, or, alternatively, that they were little birds with women's faces. By the Middle Ages, the figure of the siren had transformed into the enduring mermaid figure. Originally, sirens were shown to be male or female, but the male siren disappeared from art around the 5th century BC. The 1st century Roman historian Pliny the Elder discounted sirens as a pure fable, although Dinon, the father of Clearchus, a celebrated writer, asserts that they exist in India, and that they charm men by their song, and, having first lulled them to sleep, tear them to pieces. In his notebooks, Leonardo da Vinci wrote, "The siren sings so sweetly that she lulls the mariners to sleep. Then she climbs upon the ships and kills the sleeping mariners." Although a Sophocles fragment makes Phorcys their father, when sirens are named, they are usually as daughters of the river god Aeschylus, either by the muse Terpsichore, Melpomene or Calliope, or lastly by Sterope, daughter of King Portheon of Calydon. In Euripides' play, Helen, in her anguish calls upon winged maidens, daughters of the earth, Chthon. Although they lured mariners, the Greeks portrayed the sirens in their meadow starred with flowers, and not as sea deities. Epimenides claimed that the sirens were children of Oceanus and Ge. Roman writers linked them more closely to the sea, as daughters of Phorcys. Sirens are found in many Greek stories, notably in Homer's Odyssey. Their number is variously reported as from 2 to 8. In the Odyssey, Homer says nothing of their origin or names, but gives the number of the sirens as 2. Later writers mention both their names and number. Some state that there were 3, Pisono, Aglaope and Thelsiapia, or Aglaono, Aglaopheme and Thelsiapia, Parthenope, Ligeia, and Leucosia. Apollonius followed Hesiod gives their names as Thelshino, Molp, and Aglaophonos. Suidas gives their names as Thelsiapia, Pisono, and Ligeia. Hyginus gives the number of the sirens as 4, Tellus, Radne, Molp, and Thelsiope. Eustathius states that they were 2, Aglaopheme and Thelsiapia. An ancient vase painting attests the 2 names as Hemerope and Thelsiapia. Their individual names are variously rendered in the later sources as Thelsiapia, Thelsiope, Thelshino, Molp, Hemerope, Aglaophonos, Aglaope, Aglaopheme, Pisono, Pisitho, Parthenope, Ligeia, Leucosia, Radne, and Tellus. Statues of sirens in a funerary context are attested since the classical era, in mainland Greece, as well as Asia Minor and Magna Graecia. The so-called Siren of Canossa, Canossa di Puglia, is a site in Apulia that was part of Magna Graecia, was said to accompany the dead among grave goods in a burial. She appeared to have some psychopomp characteristics, guiding the dead on the afterlife journey. The cast terracotta figure bears traces of its original white pigment. The woman bears the feet, wings and tail of a bird. The sculpture is conserved in the National Archaeological Museum of Spain, in Madrid. The sirens were called the muses of the lower world. Classical scholar Walter Copeland Perry observed, "Their song, though irresistibly sweet, was no less sad than sweet, and lapped both body and soul in a fatal lethargy, the forerunner of death and corruption. Their song is continually calling on Persephone." The term, siren song, refers to an appeal that is hard to resist but that, if heeded, will lead to a bad conclusion. Later writers have implied that the sirens were cannibals, based on Circe's description of them, lolling there in their meadow, round them heaps of corpses rotting away, rags of skin shriveling on their bones. As linguist Jane Ellen Harrison notes of the cur as siren, it is strange and beautiful that Homer should make the sirens appeal to the spirit, not to the flesh. The siren song is a promise to Odysseus of mantic truths, with a false promise that he will live to tell them. They sing, once he hears to his heart's content, sails on, a wiser man. We know all the pains that the Greeks and Trojans once endured on the spreading plain of Troy when the gods willed it so. All that comes to pass on the fertile earth, we know it all. They are mantic creatures like the Sphinx with whom they have much in common, knowing both the past and the future, Harrison observed. Their song takes effect at midday, in a windless calm. The end of that song is death. That the sailor's flesh is rotting away, suggests it has not been eaten. It has been suggested that, with their feathers stolen, their divine nature kept them alive, but unable to provide food for their visitors, who starved to death by refusing to leave. By the 4th century, when pagan beliefs were overtaken by Christianity, the belief in literal sirens was discouraged. Although Saint Jerome, who produced the Latin Vulgate version of the Bible, used the word sirens to translate Hebrew tannim, jackals, in Isaiah chapter 13 verse 22, and also to translate a word for owls, in Jeremiah chapter 50 verse 39. This was explained by Ambrose to be a mere symbol or allegory for worldly temptations, and not an endorsement of the Greek myth. The early Christian euhemerist interpretation of mythologized human beings received a long-lasting boost from Isidore's Etymologia. They imagined that there were 3 sirens, part virgins, part birds, with wings and claws. One of them sang, another played the flute, the third the lyre. They drew sailors, decoyed by song, to shipwreck. According to the truth, however, they were prostitutes who led travelers down to poverty and were said to impose shipwreck on them. They had wings and claws because love flies and wounds. They are said to have stayed in the waves because a wave created Venus. By the time of the Renaissance, female court musicians known as courtesans filled the role of an unmarried companion, and musical performances by unmarried women could be seen as immoral. Seen as a creature who could control a man's reason, female singers became associated with the mythological figure of the siren, who usually took a half-human, half-animal form somewhere on the cusp between nature and culture. Sirens continued to be used as a symbol for the dangerous temptation embodied by women regularly throughout Christian art of the medieval era. However, in the 17th century, some Jesuit writers began to assert their actual existence, including Cornelius a Lapide, who said of woman, her glance is that of the fabled basilisk, her voice a siren's voice. With her voice she enchants, with her beauty she deprives of reason, voice and sight alike deal destruction and death. Antonio de Loria also argued for their existence, and Athanasius Kircher argued that compartments must have been built for them aboard Noah's Ark. Charles Burney expounded c. 1789, in A General History of Music. The name, according to Bochart, who derives it from the Phoenician, implies a songstress. Hence it is probable that in ancient times there may have been excellent singers, but of corrupt morals, on the coast of Sicily, who by seducing voyagers, gave rise to this fable. John Lempriere in his classical dictionary wrote, "Some suppose that the sirens were a number of lascivious women in Sicily, who prostituted themselves to strangers, and made them forget their pursuits while drowned in unlawful pleasures." The etymology of Bochart, who deduces the name from a Phoenician term denoting a songstress, favors the explanation given of the fable by Dam. This distinguished critic makes the sirens to have been excellent singers, and divesting the fables respecting them of all their terrific features, he supposes that by the charms of music and song they detained travelers, and made them altogether forgetful of their native land. The theme of perilous mythical female creatures seeking to seduce men with their beautiful singing is paralleled in the Danish medieval ballad known as Elvhøj, in which the singers are elves. The ballad is also conserved in a Swedish version. A modern literary appropriation of the myth is to be seen in Clemens Brentano's Lore Lay Ballad, published in his novel Godwi oder das Steinernbild der Mutter. In the folklore of some modern cultures, the concept of the siren has been assimilated to that of the mermaid. For example, the French word for mermaid is sirène, and similarly in certain other European languages.